You don't need to adjust who you are. You need to adjust where you are. And yet, most of us were taught to do the exact opposite. Instead of questioning the space, we question ourselves. You walk away from a conversation and feel it immediately. The shoulders tighten, the mind starts rewinding like it's reviewing game film. Suddenly, you are negotiating with yourself. Okay, next time I will say less. Next time I'll wait longer. Next time I'll just nod, smile, and save my personality for a safer location. Not because anything went wrong, but because you showed up fully and the room went quiet. That moment feels like maturity, like self awareness, like growth. It is actually self protection wearing a very convincing outfit. And most of the time, it has very little to do with who you are and everything to do with where you are standing. Which brings us here. With that in mind, welcome back to the GB podcast. Impossible is just an opinion. I'm your host, Jerry, and this is a space where we talk about growth, identity, and the internal shifts that quietly reshape our lives. This is season one, The Shift, the season about awareness, about unlearning, about realizing that the version of you that survived does not always belong in the life you are building now. New episodes drop every Thursday and are released in both English and Spanish because growth deserves language that meets you where you are. Today's episode is episode 7, titled Right for the Right Ones. To understand why this episode matters, it helps to zoom out. Earlier this season, we talked about letting go of old stories and saying quiet goodbyes to versions of ourselves that no longer fit. In episode 4, we talked about imperfect balance because growth is not neat, not symmetrical, and definitely not color coded. In episode 5, we talked about restoration and recovery, about how rest is not avoidance, and how burnout loves to pretend it is self care. In episode 6, we talked about dreams to reality, about how dreaming feels productive, but movement requires courage and alignment. So naturally, episode 7 is about discernment. Because once you rest, once you wake up, and once you start moving, you begin to notice where you belong and where you have just been surviving politely. This brings us to the problem most people never name. Belonging often feels conditional. Not because someone hands you a list of rules, but because environments quietly reward a smaller, more convenient version of you. So you learn to read the room before you enter it. You scan faces. You decide which personality version feels safest today. According to the American Psychological Association, this is known as self monitoring and self silencing. And research links to increased anxiety, emotional fatigue, and burnout. In normal terms, constantly editing yourself is exhausting. And that is where the story of being quote unquote too much usually begins. Also, let us normalize something. If overthinking burned calories, some of us would be in phenomenal shape. You replay one sentence, like a keynote speech that went off script. You analyze tone, timing, facial expressions, body language. Meanwhile, the other person has already moved on. They're trying to figure out what they're going to have for lunch, or where they parked, or why they opened their phone and forgot what they were looking for. We give ourselves way too much credit in other people's mental world. And honestly, realizing that is not embarrassing, it's freeing. So, here is what is actually happening beneath the surface. Being right for the right ones does not feel tense. It does not require constant calibration. It does not punish depth, curiosity, or emotional intelligence. This is supported by Harvard professor Amy Edmondson's research on psychological safety, including case studies in healthcare teams and at Google. Her research shows that when people feel safe to speak openly, trust increases, creativity improves, and emotional regulation stabilizes. Your nervous system picks up safety before your brain starts narrating it. When you are in the wrong space, your body tightens, your thoughts spiral, and you start drafting imaginary apology emails. When you are in the right space, you exhale. That is not intuition being dramatic. That is biology doing its job. When you zoom out, the pattern looks like this. Situation. You are not meant to be understood everywhere. Problem. Misalignment gets internalized as a personal flaw. Explanation. Context matters more than personality. Consequence. Shrinking costs you access to yourself. Once you see it, you really cannot unsee it. So, what do you do when you catch yourself in this pattern? Because awareness is great, but awareness without support just feels like anxiety with better vocabulary. Here's what research actually suggests helps. First, name the experience accurately. Cognitive behavioral research, starting with Dr. Aaron Beck, shows that distress increases when we personalize situational misalignment as a character flaw. So instead of thinking something is wrong with me, try this environment may not be a fit for how I'm wired. That is not toxic positivity. That is accurate thinking. Second, separate your identity from the reaction. Psychologist Susan David's research on emotional agility shows that fusing your identity to one moment creates shame. So instead of saying, I am too much, shift to that reaction tells me something about the dynamic, not my worth. Distance brings clarity. Clarity brings relief. Third, use your body as data, not a problem. Research on the nervous system shows that your body responds to safety and threat before your brain explains it. So when your shoulders tighten and your mind starts replaying conversations, that's not weakness, that's information. You can say, my body is telling me the space does not feel aligned. Fourth, practice self validation before external validation. Dr. Kirsten Neff's research on self compassion shows that people recover faster from social stress when they validate their own experience first. Before texting 5 people for reassurance, try this. It makes sense that I feel this way. Anyone who values depth would struggle in shallow spaces. And finally, redirect the question instead of asking, how do I fit here? Ask, where do I naturally expand? Because the goal is not to harden yourself, it is to place yourself where you don't have to brace. And when you start practicing those shifts, something subtle happens. You stop arguing with yourself. You stop shrinking preemptively. You stop confusing discomfort with deficiency. Instead of asking what's wrong with me, you start asking, is this the right environment? Because being right for the right ones means you are not performing. You are not managing impressions. You're not explaining your existence like it's a group project. You are present, and presence is powerful. This is the natural progression of the season from awareness to rest to movement to discernment. From awareness comes choice, approval or alignment, editing or clarity. Instead of saying, I'm not for everyone, you say, I'm selective by nature. That's not arrogance. That is self respect. Because choosing the right rooms is not rejection, it's responsibility. So if you have spent years believing you needed to be less to be loved, hear this clearly. You were never meant to belong everywhere. You were meant to belong deeply. The people meant for you will not require you to shrink. They will recognize you. And if you're still finding those people, those spaces, those rooms, that does not mean you're behind. It means the shift is working. If this episode resonated with you, take a moment to sit with it. You don't need to rush to change anything. You don't need to fix yourself. You only need to notice where you feel most like yourself. If you're enjoying this season, make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss an episode. New episodes drop every Thursday in both English and Spanish. And if you feel called to, share this episode with someone who might need the reminder that they are not meant to fit everywhere, only where they're truly seen. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being here. And thank you for choosing growth, awareness, and alignment. This is a GB podcast. And remember, impossible is just an opinion. See y'all next Thursday.